Hello, hello. I am Ben Pick. Thank you for joining me in Running to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. As a runner, I'm used to drivers shouting all kinds of profanities at me, and I'll shout my own back when I watch them run through a red light. I also understand the importance of every word when I hold the conversation while running. Trust me, if you're gasping for air, you're going to choose your words more carefully, and avoid wasting them. Likewise, conversations and stories have a hefty burden to carry. They need to be witty, creative, and convey critical plot information, all while flowing seamlessly and efficiently. You don't want the character to stand there and monologue the plot, or have someone villain-splain their paltry motives long enough for the hero to escape from a not-so-inescapable trap. Like setting the scene, each conversation should accomplish a task, be it moving the plot forward, establishing or refining characters, augmenting the tone, or surprisingly, setting the scene. Well-written dialogue can include details about geography, weather, or the five senses. In other words, the scene. This transforms a blank room with talking heads into a realized moment I can picture. Conversations are a mess in real life, so realistic story dialogue should be less formal and less precise. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've forgotten a point mid... Here are 7 ways to improve your dialogue. Number 1, read it out loud. Say the words out loud. If you trip over them or your tongue ties itself in knots, the dialogue may not be a realistic way people interact with one another. Number 2, slang. Though slang can make a story sound more authentic or add in more personality, including slang makes a story locked within a time period. When your story takes place in a nebulous present, adding outdated slang signifies to the reader that it really took place a decade ago. Much like the Steve Buscemi meme of, "How do you do, fellow kids?" Outside of a range of about 5 years, it feels out of place. The meme also conveys information about the one who posted it, narrowing their likely age to a good approximation. Much like slang in a story would for a given author. Slang becoming outdated was actually a plot point in the movie Billy Madison, wherein the dysfunctional adult Adam Sandler goes back to grade school. When he reaches high school, he now discovers that he's a loser, because everything that was cool when he was in school and the way he speaks is considered lame just a few years later. Billy Madison is itself a dated reference, as I doubt most people outside millennials or Gen X remember that movie well enough to quote. And even within those groups, it's a fairly small percentage. Slang terms like square, jive, or fetch aren't generally used in common lingo. Cool has proven to be more universal, though its usage is still mostly tied to certain ages and backgrounds. My point is that if you're writing teenagers and you're using slang from when you were in high school, assuming it's been a few years since you left, that freezes the story in a specific time. Doing so makes any shift in years stretch the reader's suspension of disbelief. You would be confused by a story that includes slang terms like radical, doy, or word with characters that have smartphones. Those terms come from the late 80s and early 90s, where the only cell phones were the giant monstrosities used by preppy kids like Zach Morris in Saved by the Bell. Number 3, be distinct. I found a funny website which rewrites famous scenes using the unique speech patterns of Ayn Rand novels. Her character's dialogue tends to use the formal etiquette I associate with Victorian-era England. I realize this is a misconception, but thanks to all of the films I've watched and books I've read, it's going to persist. The link is posted in the description below, and it's pretty funny, so you might want to check it out. But here is one snippet from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, rewritten for Cedric Diggory and Harry Potter. Pardon my non-existent acting skills. "Listen, Harry," Cedric asked. "The third challenge. Do you have any idea what it's about? I can't seem to figure out the last clue for the life of me." "If you want my advice, Cedric, you've made a mistake by asking me, by asking anyone. Never ask people, not about your work. Don't you know what you want? How can you stand it not to know?" The tone and diction feel removed from the series and don't sound like Harry Potter. Cedric's dialogue added extra words, making it sound more proper, wherein I don't know would have sufficed. Harry used shorter sentences, but together they felt longer than needed. He also displayed an arrogant, contemptuous attitude not found in the series. Number 4. Remove dialogue tags. As an exercise, remove all dialogue tags from a conversation. Are you still able to tell who's speaking? If you can't, then the contents of the conversation might be too generic, or you might not be using the established character voices. This could also be an indicator that there isn't enough distinction between the characters. In the MCU and Sony Marvel universe, every hero sounds unique. Even when most of them are arrogant, middle-aged white doctors, they have a distinct voice. Tony Stark wouldn't say the same thing as Doctor Strange, Bruce Banner, or Reed Richards. And if you've seen the Fantastic Four movies to verify that statement, I'm sorry. I'm going to narrow the focus of this topic to a conversation between Tony Stark and Doctor Strange.
And I want you to thank me now. Go ahead, I'm listening.
For what? Nearly blasting me into space?
Who just saved your magical ass? Me.
I seriously don't know how you fit your head into that helmet.
Admit it. You should have ducked out when I told you to. I tried to bench you, you refused.
Unlike everyone else in your life, I don't work for you.
And due to that fact, we're now in a flying donut, billions of miles from Earth.
Tony Stark is cocky, blunt, long-winded, and places himself above others as a leader. Doctor Strange is patronizing, condescending, and he doesn't waste words with those he sees as beneath him. I couldn't imagine Tony saying what Doctor Strange says, or vice versa. Once the exercise of removing those dialogue tags is done, only add back in the minimum. On the note of dialogue tags, don't add redundant ones. Including dialogue tags like exclaimed or shouted are not needed when the conversation already includes an exclamation point. "Stop that thief!" he exclaimed. The word exclaimed was implied, and adding it slowed down the drama and action of the moment. Number 5. Match dialogue to the scene and action. During a fight, keep those quips fast-paced. We should be caring about what's happening, not about the brief pauses in the fight for dialogue. Slowing the action with long banter between the hero and villain drags out the action itself and is a great way to lower the stakes. At a crime scene, the detective's dialogue can use long, drawn-out sentences as they pore over newly discovered evidence and glean meaning from every speck of dust in the room. Their analytical conversation walks the reader through their mental process, leaning towards more intellectual word choices. As for monologues, I tend to limit their usage, and if one character is speaking much more than anyone else, I'll try to trim back what they're saying down to the basics, or rework the scene entirely. Number 6. Spoken words are a small part of a conversation. What are the characters doing within a scene? Crossing your arms is a defensive gesture, used when somebody's nervous around another person, or when they're annoyed by them. Leaning in conveys a growing level of trust, or the desire to keep the contents of the conversation private. Augment the conversation with choice movements without overdoing them. Like in an action scene, repeatedly breaking up the moment to describe how the characters are lovingly staring into each other's eyes detracts from the conversation. And lastly, number 7, subtext. Similar to how physical actions convey subtext, spoken words hide additional meaning. You make me happy. I'm very upset with you. Those were useful phrases for couples with communication issues undergoing therapy, not for characters within a story. Words can show differing mindsets between characters and hint at strife within their relationships. Alice looked through the glass and said, "I like the penguins in this enclosure. They huddle close and stick together, despite what life throws at them or who walks by to tap on the glass." To which Bob replied, "But they spend their whole lives in that frigid room, no larger than my apartment. If I were in there, I'd escape no matter the cost, alone if I had to." In real life, people don't always say everything they intend to. At times, your characters should also withhold information. We may be too nervous to share our feelings, or fail to find a good comeback until 11 o'clock at night when I'm trying to go to bed. Whatever the reason, people rarely say everything on their mind. Your characters should behave the same way if you want them to feel authentic. Those are 7 ways to improve dialogue within stories. Use them and aim to reinforce the drama of the scene through its dialogue. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write. What's your favorite movie quote? Mine is the misquoted Darth Vader line,
"No, I am your father."
That turned the Star Wars series on its head. Those words and the reactions to them brought in more depth to Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. Let me know in the comments how you make your own dialogue sound more authentic. If you enjoyed this content, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Join the Running to Write community on Facebook, Twitter, and all social media to share your thoughts. See you next time. Until then, strike up a conversation with a stranger and observe their mannerisms or tendencies. Those are perfect for story fodder.